Hello students, welcome to this introductory session of the series on Jacques Derrida's essay Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences. Students, this series is going to be a discussion on a very important school of thought, school of critical thought which emerged during 20th century. And students, if we look carefully at the growth or evolution or the history of the philosophical thought, we find that the first quarter of the 20th century is exceptionally remarkable because during this period several schools of thought emerged or their philosophical bases have been laid down. And as in the previous series on the Clint Brooks, we had already discussed about new criticism that is also a product of 20th century. And in this series, we will take up for discussion the theoretical concepts propounded by this eminent French philosopher Jacques Derrida. But first, in this session, we are going to have a brief introduction with Jacques Derrida, with this essay, and along with a detailed analysis of the very background or the backdrop which prepare the ground for the growth of the ideas or the concepts upon which Jacques Derrida has worked on. So let's begin with an introduction with Jacques Derrida. In the field of philosophical studies, Jacques Derrida is well known for his concept of semiotic analysis, which is known as theory of deconstruction. Students, this French philosopher is considered to be one of the major figures associated with post-structuralism and postmodern philosophy. Derrida was born on July 15, 1930 at Alger in Algeria. And as far as his work in the field of critical studies or philosophical studies are concerned, he published more than 40 books together with hundreds of essays and public presentations. But his best known works are the three seminal texts. They are Writing and Difference, Speech and Phenomena, and Of Grammatology. All three were published in French language in 1967 and later on they were translated into English. Writing and Difference was translated in 1978, Speech and Phenomena was translated in 1973, and Of Grammatology was translated into English in 1976. And this great philosopher died on October 8, 2004, in Paris. Students, as I have told you that Jacques Derrida is considered to be one of the very eminent personalities in the field of post-structuralist philosophy. So before knowing about or before trying to understand the very concepts which were propounded by Jacques Derrida, it's imperative for us to know that what structuralism is. Only then we can understand post-structuralism. So let's try to understand the very concept or the basics of the structuralist school of thought. Structuralism is a movement of thought in the human sciences which has affected a number of fields of knowledge and inquiry, especially philosophy, sociology, anthropology, history, and linguistics. Broadly speaking, this school of thought implies that elements of human culture must be understood by way of their relationship to a broader system. In this very process of understanding a particular element with relation to a broader system, it works to uncover the structures that underlie all things that humans do, think, perceive, and feel. Everything we can say in the theory of structuralism is the product of a system of signification, is the product of code. So the relationship between the elements of the code or the sign give it signification. So, and this structuralism began or emerged in the science of linguistics, and more particularly in the work of Ferdinand de Saussure. So let's uh, mm, have a brief introduction with Ferdinand de Saussure, who is an influential theorist as far as structuralism is concerned. So Ferdinand de Saussure, an eminent Swiss structural linguist, gave the concept of language as a sign system or structure whose individual components can be understood only in relation to each other or to the system as a whole rather than to an external reality. For this, Saussure made a distinction between langue and parole. Langue means an idealized abstraction of language, and to be more simple we can say lang represents a language as a whole, for example French, German, English, and parole represents utterance, a particular use of individual units of language. Uh, and so there is a distinction between diachronic and synchronic units also. Saussure explained that diachronic denotes the historical study of the growth of language, and synchronic denotes the study of language as a system at any given moment. So this distinction between synchronic and diachronic owes its this very concept owes its existence to the concept of sign, which is elaborated by Saussure as being divided into signifier and signified. To be more simple, we can say that sign is the object or the thing that conveys some meaning, and signifier is an abstract concept or idea, or we can say a signifier is the things that give meaning, the idea that give meaning, or the spoken words or the images or the sounds. And signified is what is evoked in the mind, that how the mind perceives that sound or visual image, that is the signified. And Saussure further argued that different languages have different words to refer to the same object or concept. So there is no intrinsic reason why a specific signifier is used to express a given concept or idea. So the signs are arbitrary. Signs gain their meaning from their relationships and contrast with other signs. So how a sign gains its meaning, that depends upon the relationship, and that relationship is explained by Saussure in terms of binary opposition. Students, the concept of binary opposition is also very one of the key concepts as far as structuralism is concerned. And this concept of binary opposition, deals with the bilateral aspects of linguistic sign, which we have just discussed, that every linguistic sign has two aspects which are inseparably connected. They are being signifier and signified, or we can say that every sign has two aspects. One is the sound sequence on the level of expression, and the another one is the concept on the level of meaning. So the relationship between the sound sequence and the concept of a linguistic sign is said to be arbitrary or predetermined by the convention only. So here to be more simple, we can say that in binary opposition, the meaning in a narrative, the meaning in a particular sense is based upon opposition. Means if I have to define black, I have to know about white. If I am to define night, I have to know about day. If I am to define man, I have to know about women. So the meaning is based upon opposition. The meaning can be understood in relation to opposition. And some other structuralist philosophers are Claude Levi-Strauss, whose very theory uh, Jacques Derrida has referred in the essay which is prescribed for your syllabus. Then another famous structuralist philosopher is Noam Chomsky. So students, in brief, we can say that structuralism is a school of thought which looks at language as a system of science, and in that very system it is explained that every object has its meaning only in relation to the other elements. Means an object has a meaning only because of a broader structure to which it is related, to which it is connected. So now the point is that how post-structuralism emerged from this very concept of structuralism. Post-structuralism emerged in France during 1960s as a movement critiquing structuralism. Students, post-structuralism rejects the structuralist notion that the dominant word in a pair is dependent on its subservient counterparts. As I have just told you that if I am to know day, I must have the knowledge of night. So means in this very pair of binaries, one is the dominant, another is the subservient. But the post-structuralist theory rejects this very notion. It argues that founding knowledge either on pure experience or on systematic structures is impossible, because history and culture condition the study of underlying structures, and these are subjects to misinterpretations. So post-structuralism is a critique of the very concept of structuralism to understand everything as a part of a broader structure. And this very concept of post-structuralism came into existence in a lecture which was presented by Jacques Derrida while discussing the structuralist philosophy or the structuralist thought in terms of language as a science system. And this lecture was presented by Derrida at Johns Hopkins International Colloquium on the Language of Criticism and the Sciences of Man in October 1966. This essay articulates a post-structuralist theoretical paradigm and effectively brings out the important distinctions between the classical mode of thinking contrasted with the post-structuralist phase of thinking. Now the question is that what is the classical way of thinking? So the classical way of thinking, according to Derrida, gives structure a center and neutralizes the structurality of structure and thereby limits the play of structure. Here lies the seeds of Derrida's idea of deconstruction, which is the key concept of the post-structuralist philosophy. Derrida gave this, just rejected this idea of structuralism that every structure has a fixed center, because by rejecting this very idea, he neutralized the concept of the structurality of the structure. Means every structure has a shifting center, every structure has a shifting structurality, so thereby the structuralism limits the play of structure. But Derrida allows the play of structure. Derrida believes in, gives this very concept that no meaning is absolute. No meaning can be understood only in terms of its structure. Meaning is flexible, meaning is shifting, meaning is moving. So this is the key idea or the key concept of Derrida's critical thought, which came into discussion or in the wider or broader use with this very lecture which Derrida presented in 1966. And in this lecture, which is prescribed there in your syllabus, and this essay, students, we can better understand this very lecture or the essay by Derrida, which is prescribed in your syllabus, if we look at into two parts. In the first part, Derrida has examined the shifting relationship between structure and center, which I have just touched upon in the previous slide. We will discuss about this shifting relationship in the next video in detail. And in the second part of the essay, Derrida has given an analysis of another famous structuralist philosopher, Levi-Strauss concepts regarding the problem of thinking through the relationship between structure and center. So students, this is all for this session. I hope now you have a clear idea of that how post-structuralism emerged as a critique of structuralist philosophy, and Derrida is one of the key figures in the field of post-structuralist philosophy. So in the next video, we will discuss in detail that how Derrida began with his idea of critiquing the very concept of structure and center as given by structuralist philosophers. Thank you.